Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Rewind that. It's your girl, Miss K. If this is your first time coming across my channel, welcome. Please be sure to subscribe if you like the vibe and hit that notification bell so you know when I upload more videos like this one today, guys. Listen, I'm always excited that my girl Moochie is with me, but we have the living legend Larry in the building. Gracing my channel for the very first time. I thank you so much, sir.
This is gonna be fun. I tell you. Woo! You done messed up. You done messed up. You let Mr. Talk a Lot come on your channel.
No, I knew exactly.
No, this is a good topic. We need somebody like you.
I knew exactly what I was doing.
We need somebody like you.
I targeted you. Trust.
Exactly.
Okay. And of course, guys, you know Moochie, my girl Moochie. She up there looking cute with the purple, sipping on whatever that is.
It's water.
No,
it's water.
All right, guys.
Why does Moochie look like she should be front row at a fashion show or something? She's got the big glasses, the hair all whipped up. She looks like she should be at like some Fashion Week Brian Park couture show or something.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at stuff like this.
You know, people be whispering like, "Who's that?" Oh, that's the editor of such and such magazine. Be like, oh yeah, I see. You know.
Okay, girl.
Thank you. Don't it remind you of the lady's glasses from The Incredibles?
Yeah, look,
we don't
that
do
little lady with the hair
that
on the black version. We don't do kids.
All right, let me just say hey to a few people. Maybe a lot of people haven't seen this episode, but it's okay. They can watch it on the replay. Hey, Little Rock and Kendall and Daria, thank you so much for being here. So we are talking about the 1619 Project. This is a documentary that is on Hulu, and this is in honor of Black History Month. Hey, Samara. So let's talk, guys. Since Larry, this is your first time being here, I would like to start with you first. But first, I just want to, lay out a little introduction about the 1619 Project. So basically, as I said, it's a documentary, but it's also it's based on a book called the 1619 Project. Let me see, because I actually do have that down somewhere. It's called, the 1619 Project. Why in the world am I not like where I'm supposed to be? I think it's, I'm so sorry. Like, I have so many things. It's crazy. Wow. Okay. I thought I wrote it down. But I guess I didn't. That's really nuts. So it's called 1619 Project. Yeah, I can't believe it because I literally remember myself writing it down. So that makes absolutely no sense to me. But oh yeah. So the book is, I think it's called something about a new origin story or something like that. That's what the book is called. If you can look that up, Larry, and just correct me if I'm wrong. But
yeah, it's based off of the 1619 Project, a new origin story.
Yes, okay, the new origin story, which I could have sworn that I wrote it down. My gosh. All right, so let me just read what I found. She's a New York Times. She works for the New York Times, and she started writing this book, right? So the purpose of this project, it was to make a bold claim, which remains the central idea of the book, that the moment in August 1619, when the first enslaved Africans arrived in the English colonies that would become the United States, could, in a sense, be considered the country's origin, right? The reasoning behind this is simple. Enslavement is not marginal to the history of the United States. It is inextricable. So many of our traditions and institutions were shaped by slavery, and so many of our persistent racial inequalities stem from its enduring legacy. Identifying the start of such a vast and complex system is a somewhat symbolic act. It was not until the late 1600s that slavery became codified with new laws in various colonies that firmly established the institution's racial basis and dehumanizing structure. But 1619 marks the earliest beginnings of what would become this system. So just a little, overview of, of this situation. Yes. So as we can see, this is the author here. Nickole Hannah. So Larry, what did you think about this? Just the first two episodes, just as a whole, as you were watching it. I mean, I was definitely captivated. So,
Um, first off, I was a little taken aback a little bit because I was expecting something different. It was I found it's much more entertaining than I anticipated it being, because I've heard so much. I haven't read the book, the 69 Project. I haven't read the book yet. I've heard so much about it. I've heard so much about, the 1619 Project, CRT, all the other stuff that goes on,
Yes.
I was expecting something that was going to be far more academic than this. And it was much more entertaining than I anticipated. So I was like, I watched the first 4 episodes and I had to go back and watch the first 2 again, because I was like, I mean, I should watch this with a fresh set of eyes.
Right.
I was expecting something different and I didn't get it. And sometimes when you expect something and you don't get it, it kind of throws you off a little bit. So
yeah. Same with me. I was like looking at the first one, and then I was like, when it first started, it was showing like these people coming up on the shores, this and that. I was like, what am I watching? Right. I just didn't know what I was watching. But then as she started narrating and things of that nature, I said, it just caught me. I just kept watching. And then it just was, I was like, oh, this is really good so far. And it's very informative too. A lot of surprises. And we're going to talk about those. But go ahead, Moochie. What did you think about it?
I watched the first 2 episodes. I didn't get past I went back and watched it again, for the simple fact is, with both episodes, the first one, how it talked about the voting and how they kept basically moving the finish line.
Yeah.
And it makes me think and wonder if, how can I say this? It makes me think and wonder sometimes if things would have been better for Black people if things were still segregated, because we progressed more and we were closer. To me, I feel like once the segregation came in at a certain point, it caused more division with Black people. I mean, that's what I
would be
took
the
away.
first one to wonder that.
That's what I took away from that, and thank you. And I also I don't want to go too far ahead. I'm sticking with the first episode as far as them talking about how they view how did they basically bring back Jim Crow but an updated version.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's a lot.
It's hard. You know how you stumble over your words because it's so much to process.
Yeah, it really is. And I had I was trying to take notes, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to leave this alone. Where you just in shock
with certain things that's happening, and so much things that's happening, and so many distractions they do when they're passing these laws now, because we're distracted by other stuff.
That's one of the things that is tough for me when I watch these documentary series like this, is that each episode that they do, when you start talking about the history of voting rights and civil rights, and then you start talking about Black women's health care and the whole thing they talked about with the so-called origins of gynecology and all that. Each and every one of those topics could be an entire documentary series on its own. And so sometimes when I watch these things, I feel like they're getting short shrift, because you cannot possibly talk about them in such a way that you're really going to go into depth and touch on all of the most important parts of it when you have an hour-long episode, and then you have to move on to the next topic.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I was thinking the same thing. I was like, how am I supposed to take notes on this thing? I'm like, it's impossible. Like, it's impossible. And we're supposed to just be here for pretty much an hour. I'm like, that's going to be really, we can't. We got to just kind of move on. So I do have a little format of some things to talk about. A lot of this stuff you already, you said, Larry, we're going to talk about that a little later, especially when we get to talking about episode 2. That's pretty much what we're going to be talking about with the women, the gynecology and all that stuff. But the first thing that I want to address is, the pride that she talks about when she introduces herself. She talks about her father and how he had pride, like in their home, he had the flag hanging, you know what I'm saying? And she was embarrassed by that. So, for me, I don't know if you guys are, if you feel the same way I do, but I believe there are a lot of Black people that feel this way, that once you see, and I'm sorry, I know this is misjudging or prejudging. Once I see a flag in front of someone's home, I'm automatically thinking they're a racist. I mean, a lot of the times that's how I feel. I feel like a lot of people that have so much pride in this country, especially white people, I'm very leery of them. So anyway.
It's a flag in front of my house.
Okay, but I like
is a vet. He's a vet.
See, I like the explanation, and even her uncles were saying you shouldn't be embarrassed by it because he was, he was a vet. So I get it, but
my father's
I just
a vet
felt
too.
So I don't. Yeah, go ahead, Larry. Sorry.
Part of there's always that. I think there's always that sort of internal conflict that we have as Black people when it comes to national pride and patriotism, and the acknowledgement of all the terribleness that's happened with us. And some people wondered, why would Black people want to fight for our country in these various conflicts? And you look at like even as recent as World War II, where Black people basically had to fight to be able to fight. They wanted to make us all cooks and valets and stewards, and then when they realized that, white people were still very much under the false impression that Black men were cowards and that we wouldn't fight, that when it came time to fight, we would turn and run. And by the end of that war, you had white bomber groups saying they won't fly for on any missions unless they had Tuskegee Airmen escorting them, because they never lost a bomber. These men would sacrifice their own lives rather than give up one of the bombers. And that, it's funny that it went from that in World War II to not much longer, like 20 years later, to where they were basically just recruiting the hell out, just drafting the hell out of us for Vietnam. They realized Black men aren't cowards. They will fight, and we have a whole lot of them that we're not using. Let's just start drafting all these poor folks. And it's, I mean, I get it. My dad served in the military. I served in the military. I understand that conflict that there is. But at the same time, we built this piece. This is our country,
Right.
I mean, I know people often say, I see this flag and I'm ashamed of it, or I don't understand why people are proud of this. And I'm not one of those people that's flying a flag out in front of my house. I don't have a flag thing on my car. I am not ashamed always of being American. There are times where I'm ashamed of what this country has done and what it has become. But at the same time, I'm proud of what we have done to build this country, because we have, from the moment foreigners stepped on this land and started building it to what it is today, which is some people may feel a sense of shame in that in itself, but from the moment we start building, we were here on with shovels in the ground on every project,
Yeah.
And
I think that's like the major part of this project too, is to like remind us that you can't, like you said, it's inextricable. You can't extract us from history. No. Like a lot of this stuff that happened happened because of us. You know what I mean?
Right.
They can't erase us from the history because half the stuff we invented. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say if you if somebody I know it's totally off the topic, but
Fun.
somebody woke up and decided I'm not going to use any products that the black man created, they would
Mm-hmm.
be really messed up. A lot of stuff they couldn't use, starting with waking up in the morning and turning on your lights. So you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
ironing your clothes,
That
everything.
wouldn't
So
that
it's
wouldn't
just like
happen for 5 minutes. Let one of them have a
you
heart
know,
attack and
your
need open heart
GPS,
surgery.
your cell phone, all of that.
Right. Yeah.
So you
Just let one
know,
of them have a heart attack and need open heart surgery and say they're not going to use the procedure.
there you
Mm-hmm.
go.
Right.
know,
It's just
I
like
mean, come on.
seriously.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yes. Hey, Jeremiah and AG and Rashonda came through, and Valiant Visions 314.
he
Awesome.
got a good comment.
Yeah.
I will
Valiant.
say this though, for anybody who's struggling to decide whether or not they should support their country or whether or not they believe in the goodness of this country, because I struggle with it all the time. I often say, sometimes I just say I just want to leave and go live somewhere else because I'm tired of the struggle. I'd rather just go
Mm-hmm.
somewhere and exist. you know
Yeah.
I will say, when you look
I
back and
got
you
you.
see all that people have done, you know, when you see when you go back and you watch some of these documentaries and you watch all the blood that's been shed and all the hard times and all the people who have been billy clubbed and imprisoned,
Mm-hmm.
they
Water
did all
hoses,
that.
dogs.
Yeah, all that. They did all of that so that we can live and be recognized for our full citizenship. And I don't think we should allow the racist white element of this nation to force us off of that,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
push us away, to make us feel something different. And I was watching one of these programs and they were showing, the dudes marching through what was that town in here in Virginia? I don't remember the name of it, where they Charlottesville, and they were
Williamsburg. Oh no,
talking about,
Sean.
yeah, they had those Nazis talking about, Jews won't replace us. And I
Yeah.
and I thought, I was watching that and I kept thinking to myself, I'm not going to allow these people to force me to hate them.
Right.
I'm not going to let them win and let them force me to hate them. I'm not going to do it. And part of
Yeah.
that is it's the same thing with this country. At some point, you have to recognize this is ours. I'm not going to allow them to force me out of my home. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Amen to
I built
that.
this thing. I protected this
That's right.
thing. My family, my
That's
my
right.
my, my family protected this house. It's ours.
Yep. I
I'm
think there
not
was
saying
a
they don't
part in
have a
the
right to be here, but we have a right to be here just as much as anyone else.
right. Yes. And also I think that's something that I think they were saying that W.E.B. Du Bois was saying that Frederick Douglass, I think, was saying something like that during, I think it was like in episode 2 maybe, where they were saying like um Lincoln was trying to get them to, move or get out, leave the country, go back wherever. And like, no, we were here. We stepped on the soil with you. We're gonna be here until it's over. You know what I'm saying? We
But
helped build this thing
Right.
and all that, so we're not going anywhere.
it's a lot of lies
Right.
in that too. Some
Yeah.
of us were born here, some of us was already here, and they changed our ethnicity to
Mm-hmm.
it from Indian to to black.
Yes.
And she
Yeah.
discussed that where they did the whole thing with I don't I'm trying not to go too
It's
you know
okay. It's
where
fine.
they
Yeah.
talked about the whole parents if your parent was white, then
Mm-hmm.
what race you got.
The whole
And then
drop of
she
blood
discussed
thing.
all of that. Yeah, and it's just messed up. All of the essays that happened in the slave quarters,
Mm-hmm.
and then that journal that she read of the woman
Oh
that
yeah.
married the slave
Mm-hmm.
master, and
Yeah.
she could see all of the results
All the
of the
mistreatments and
children being created, and she
mm.
could
Oh
see their
yeah.
features. And it's just sad. It's just sad that a lot when they talked about that, and that monster, that basically they had that statue up of him in New York, the gynecologist.
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll get there.
yeah,
But
it's just so much. It was a lot to process
Mm-hmm.
with just episodes 1 and 2, where I had to go back. Like I said, I had to go back and watch it again,
Yeah, me too. Just to
because
be
it's
here
like
tonight.
stuff you heard where you couldn't believe, and
Yeah.
it's just sad, and the things that are just going on now too.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of that, we're gonna talk about real quick. And anybody that has not saying, hey, Tywayne Wheat is in the building. What's
Yeah.
up? Thank you for coming through, stopping through. Tywayne plays Fat Mike in BMF, y'all.
All
Show the
right.
brother some love.
There you go.
So here's the thing. So Nickole, she brings up the fact that Americans, right? They identify themselves, or let's say she says that Americans is anchored in the idea that we're the greatest democracy in the world. Like our identity is anchored in that, right? We're the greatest democracy in the world. And we also believe that freedom is defined by the right to choose our leaders. But she also made it clear to say that, this country might not be a democracy at all. And so, speaking of that, we're going to go right into the next topic, which is basically the voting rights. So how ironic is it that American claims such freedom, but to this day, they're trying to limit folks the right to vote. Like we saw in this documentary, the whole thing that happened in Atlanta, where they had a designated place. You know how you get in the mail where you're supposed to go to vote? They had a designated place to go vote. When they get there, they're telling all these people that, oh, they're in the wrong place. And at some point, it just makes me believe with my heart that they're doing this obviously on purpose to deter people, to turn them away. Because once people go home, they know they're not coming back out. That's what they think. They're not coming back out. And so let them go home. Anything to make somebody discouraged, right? Especially if they're old. They got up in the morning, they came out with their cane, their assistant. They probably ordered what's that? The assist. I forgot what it's called. I always
Accessoride.
Accessoride. They probably ordered that and everything to get out there, and once you turn people away and they got to go back, they're not going through that all over again. So then you succeeded at stopping people from voting. And I could not believe that this is happening now. And you guys, for me, it might not be a shock to you guys, but for me, I try to stay away from stuff like this because I'm very, I don't like to say it, but it's true. I'm a little prone to like depression and stuff like that. So I don't watch the news as much. It really messes with me. When all the stuff with politics, I try to stay away from it. But this was shocking to me. I know I heard stuff about, during the elections that there was stuff going on with the polls. I know that. But this right here, I couldn't believe it.
They was doing that in New York, where when I went to go vote, this was for when I voted for Obama the first time. They moved me from one place to another, and when I got there, they was like, "Oh, you're not here anymore. You go here."
See that?
And when I got there, it was real crowded, but I stayed and voted.
Right.
It was early,
it's
so I was like, "I'm gonna stay."
Yeah.
Years ago, I think it was Obama's second term, with the election for his second term. I was doing a freelance job for this think tank here in DC called the Center for American Progress, and they sent me down to Atlanta to go and film people and interview folks who had issues with their voting and find out if they had any issues and talk to people about the process. And so I got there. And the first place that they sent me to, they said, okay, we want you to go to this polling place first and set up and interview people as they're coming out or if they're going in, whatever. And so I went to the first polling place. It wasn't there. It was basically like an old school or something that had been closed down. And so I called them. I said, well, first of all, this is the first thing that I guess we have to talk about. You sent me to a place. This is where they're telling you this is an active polling place, and the building's not even physically, functioning there. It's not even operating anymore. So I ended up there. As I was there, people were asking like, "Hey, where's the polling place?" I ended up there for a little bit, telling people once I found out where they go, where they're supposed to go. And so Once I finally
Wow.
got to the other polling place, I ended up interviewing quite a few people, and it was a debacle back. This was what, Obama's second term. That was what, 8 years ago, 10 years
Mhm.
ago. I mean, it's like things haven't got any better in that amount of time. I mean, that's just
Yeah. And then it showed, and also in this documentary, it shows us that a lot of the things that was put in place with certain presidents, they, when somebody else gets in office, they undo it. And
Yeah.
so it's like when we try to take steps forward, somebody's getting back in office to just, nope, we're not doing that. And it's just like, when are there going to be laws put in place where you can't change certain things? Because it's just like an ongoing fight. So it's just, I don't know, I'm just very frustrating at this point and just sad.
no, that'll
LSW
never be the
says,
case.
right.
Well,
They
no,
had to,
partly because we have what they call a living constitution, which is
mhm,
can always be changed, and
yeah,
in some respects, it's a terrible thing when it changes for the bad, but in some respects, it's also really, really a good thing that we have that,
right.
so that when we do get the country in a good headspace and we can make the changes that are necessary, so that we can have more justice and more equality, the Constitution is set up for us to change the laws to allow that.
Yeah. Well, what they're doing is continuously making new laws to try to limit, the voting
Right.
rights. You know what I mean? So it's just like how can they do something to stop that at least? Target something that they keep on going back and forth with. And like if you say that we're supposed to be free and we all have the right to vote, then they got to do something where they need to stop messing with this stuff. But hey, what are you
We,
gonna do?
I think part of the problem with some of that is that as Americans, we have gotten, and I don't know if we've always been this way, but we have gotten to the point where we're very much like I call it the microwave culture. We want everything fast. We want it in like, a minute or less.
Hmm.
We don't
Mm-hmm.
want the details. We don't want to know how the sausage is made. We just want the sausage and we want it quickly.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that the way our laws work, the way our policies work, it's very, very process oriented. And we saw a very good example of that when Mitch McConnell and the Republicans just simply said, we are not going to even give Obama's Supreme Court pick even a vote. We're not going to give him an up and down vote. We're not going to meet with them. We're not going to do anything because we don't want to. And
Hmm.
because they were in control of the Senate, they were able to control that process. They didn't just screw over President Obama, but they disenfranchised the tens of millions of us who voted for him and wanted to have a pick that represented our views, and they denied us that because they understood the process. And I think that if more and more Americans are willing to dig in a little bit deeper and understand the processes of these things, they won't be bored out of their skull when people start talking about them and change the channel. They'll start to understand and they'll start to say something about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Larry. Also, Demarcus Vaughn, hi. He's got the hammers up for Moochie as well.
What's
So
up, D
what's
Mickey?
good, Miss? What's good, Miss
I call him
King?
D Mickey.
A lot of laws are outdated. We are still counted as 3/4 of a person. Thank you for the
Mm-hmm.
super chat. Yeah, so just so it's totally sad, but so also we have to where she starts talking about the history of the American Revolution, right? And how she goes to what's that historical colonial site. Another thing
Mhm.
that opened my eyes. I mean, I know that they had this, but when she said that she's always so surprised about how Black people don't show up to these places when they had so much to do with them. It made me say, you know what? I need to get my family together so we could go on and take a trip. We about to go to Williamsburg, okay? So, she was just talking about how involved the enslaved people were during the American Revolution. And her question to that professor guy that she sat and spoke with was, it's history, so it's evident, and even he was saying it. And it's like, why is it such a fight to have us or include us and say that we were actually a part of it, like the majority of it, and the reason why it was won, and you know what I'm saying? And he had to say he didn't understand it either, because it just wouldn't have happened without them. And even that guy, what was this, Dunbar or something? Was it Dunmore? Governor Dunmore or something. He had, it was called Dunmore's Proclamation or something like that, where he even had this thing called the Ethiopian. I should have wrote it down, but
he wrote
had
down different ethnicities.
Yeah, he
that
had
was
this whole
crazy to
thing
me.
where it was like an Ethiopian thing. He had them fighting and they won, and it was just like, you know, basically that whole thing sparked the revolution. And it's just that started, and then they wanted, you know, they started to what was that, kind of like the beginning of the Reformation after that? I think that was the beginning of the Reformation, or let me just look, guys, because
the revolution was starting.
The revolution started, but I'm trying to. I think I got them mixed up. Yeah, that's
you know, that was one part. That was one part of the first episode that I took issue with.
The revolution.
You know, because I've been to Colonial Williamsburg probably 2-3 times, maybe 4 times. I don't know. I've been down to Williamsburg a number of times. I've been over to Jamestown a couple of times, and I will say every time I've gone down there, they have been absolutely terrific about talking about Black folks and enslaved people and the contributions of them, their presence there, the stuff that, like, they talked about. They didn't talk about just big picture stuff. Some of, like, when you go down there, you take a tour, sometimes, I mean, maybe it's just I've lucked up every time I've gone and gotten really great tour guides, but they talk about even some of the small things. Like, they talked about how you would have these Black women that were cooks or chefs that worked in the big houses, I guess, and they would make these like little fine puff French pastries in like an open flamed, you know, fireplace oven. And they was talking about how difficult that is to do it even with today's technology. And these women were doing that there with this, you know, really what was sort of primitive technology. And I mean, they really, at least from what I've experienced, if you go to those places, it seems like they have done a fantastic job of talking about not just the white side of history, but how Black people very much were a part of that. And I definitely recommend people, if you haven't gone, definitely go to Williamsburg.
Yeah, I definitely want to go. You know, but I think that's what he was trying to say, though, is that, because I think he was one of the people that, you know, he was one of the representatives for that place or whatever, but he was basically trying to say too, is that they're trying to, you know, sell this story or keep this lie alive that slaves were passive. And that, you know, if that was the truth of the matter, then the American Revolution wouldn't have taken place, you know, because these people were, the whole reason why it started too is it was because of a rumor that they were trying to revolt. And then you had people, the slaves, overhearing the idle threat that Dunmore made. I hope I'm saying his name right. You know, and they were about it, like, okay, you serious about what you're saying? He's like, no, I'm not serious, get out of here, you know, but winds up using them anyway, you know. So I'm glad to know that, because I honestly, you know, believed the lie that slaves were passive, because I've always wondered, like, how come there wasn't so many. I've only heard about 1 or 2 slave revolutions.
A couple of uprisings. It was uprisings when they were coming here on the boat sometimes, where they was throwing them
the
over.
whole Amistad
it was
thing.
Uprisings at the plantations. And they suppressed it because they didn't want news to travel like that, where other uprisings would happen. The only one they really talked about was Nat Turner, and they basically, you know, he was publicly
they mutilated him, and you know,
exactly. So, you know, they did that to scare even more people.
All right, so moving on. So, you know, the book, like I said, it's the 1619 Project. So as we get further on into the episode, we learn about Nickole's book and how there was like this backlash, like we get one, she started to get some, negative press. One politician calls the whole project a lie, while Trump said that the 1619 Project and the crusade against American history is toxic, and it's just sad that they don't want us to know the truth of anything. And they also started to ban it in schools. Like they didn't want, any type of curriculum that had anything to do with the 1619 Project. Like they were like, parents were gathering together and all of this stuff, So,
who's in the room mostly,
right?
Okay? A lot of them is very afraid of the truth, afraid of the repercussions that they conceive in their minds.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it's ironic. Look at the county they're in.
I know, Fulton County.
They don't want us included in nothing. They don't want to.
Cherokee County School District.
So go ahead.
What part of it is though is that the vast majority of people in this country don't go to college. The vast majority of people, I think there's still probably, I don't know. I think it's gone up some over the years, but I still think it's only probably like 12, 15% or something like that may go to college and actually finish. But the part of the reason that they want to fight so much to keep this out of the primary school system is that generally you don't learn about this level of stuff until you get to college. Once you take history in college, and then you have your mind blown when you're like, wait a minute, how come I didn't learn about any of this stuff in high school or middle school or any? I was blessed in the fact that I had a father who was a serious history buff. And when I would get in trouble, the way that he would punish me often was, here, now you have to read this autobiography of Malcolm X. You have to read this autobiography of Frederick Douglass, or you have to read, and I don't think he realized he was turning me into a bit of a militant with some of the books that he was having me read. But, most people don't read. They don't learn this part of our history until they get to college. And because it's such a small percentage of the population that actually goes to college, if you can keep this history out of the primary schools, you will keep the vast majority of our country ignorant to its own history.
Definite facts. And that's so funny because she said the same thing, but see, she looked up with having a black teacher in high school that gave her this book that talked about the year 1619, and she was saying the same thing like you, Larry. Like, what the heck, Well, that's what most people most people would say. Well, why didn't I know about this? And she was feeling the same way, but it opened her eyes, you know. And so, Muchi, you wanted to add on to anything?
I feel like a lot of people eyes would if a lot of people, I feel like people need to watch this for a simple fact is it is going to open your eyes to a lot of things. We already know a lot of the things that has happened to people in slavery, as well as people going for the civil rights movement and marches and things of that nature. But this went deeper. Where it was stuff that I didn't even know.
Yeah.
And I knew some things, but when I heard some of the stuff, it made me angry, but not angry where I didn't want to watch. You know how some things get you so mad when you can't watch it?
Yeah.
This was where I just was like, I want to know. I'm glad I'm knowing this.
Yeah.
And I feel like the younger people need to watch this so they stop hurting each other.
And for those of you who don't know, slavery in this country is actually still legal.
Yeah, I know.
They just made lynching a crime.
They just made lynching a crime this year.
I mean, what is taking them so long? I don't understand.
I mean, the reality of it is, if you're out there as a black man or woman thinking that you're Billy Badass committing crimes, you are putting yourself at risk of becoming a legalized slave in this country. Because if you go to prison, they do have the right to put you to work.
That's exactly what they do.
For no wages. You will be a slave.
Yeah, the prison system is just like a backup. It's like Yeah, that's what the prison system is. It's like a backup to slavery, basically. Remember remember in Life when he's like, what difference does it make? At least the state of Mississippi got 40 years of free labor out of the deal. Remember that?
Yeah.
Even though I'm making fun of what he said,
but it's the truth.
Yeah, they
this
have
is
all the
really
whole
how they think.
the whole convict leasing program, the whole system where they would snatch black men off the street if you were walking down. If you were just standing around, they would say you were loitering.
Mm-hmm. They still do that now.
Yes, but
Let
I
me
mean,
see some
I guess
ID.
yes. But back in the day, they would literally snatch you up. They would convict you of loitering, and then they would put you into a convict leasing program where they would take you and basically lease you out to some company to do their labor for free.
Mm-hmm. And put them on a chain gang too. They'll do that.
Yeah, unbelievable. So I was skipping ahead when I started talking about the Reformation era. So now the Reformation era comes, and it seems hopeful and everything. So this is what their like little stipulations are. Abolishing slavery, equal protection under the law, birthright citizenship, illegal to deny voting rights on account of race, right? And so it seems hopeful until what's this guy, Rutherford B. Hayes, agrees to withdraw the federal troops from the South, right? And this starts to cause former enslavers to kill the newly freed men, plus white men that sided with them, right? And in comes these people, people in power, the white people in power, who are now working to create what she called a new order. This lady that she's talking to, they want to create a new order and get some new laws together, which later becomes known as Jim Crow, right? And it's also at this time is the beginning of several massacres and lynchings. And one of the crazy things, nothing is really crazy like that anymore, but one of the things that irked me was, like I was talking about, how they just undo everything. They put something in place saying that you could only vote unless your grandfather voted, knowing daggone well that most of these, or all, if not all of these men, their grandfathers were slaves. So daggone well they didn't vote. So it's just like you're trying to put in these laws that make they ain't gonna work for nobody.
Exactly. They passed the laws and then put the loopholes in. Like they had to breed a certain amount before they even actually could cast a ballot.
And isn't it one where you have to know, right? Like you have to know how to read. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. They used to make them read in front of them though.
Yeah, they had all kinds of those things. I mean, and they still talk about them to some extent nowadays, where they talk about like the voter ID, the voter ID laws. They talk about that in some places. They say it is akin to a poll tax, because they're saying some people simply just don't have the money to get an ID. And I've had this debate with God knows how many people, both black and white, and some people just don't get it. But there are some people who simply do not have the money to spare $12 or $20 or whatever it costs to get an ID. And for some people, if you have to then go get a driver's license, you have to go and take a day off of work. You have to get transportation to the DMV, stand there all day. You may have to go pay to get a birth certificate from the register, from the county register, and then pay to get some people just don't have the means to do that.
Right. And I believe they're aware of all of that, which is why they try to,
And so this whole thing with voter ID laws, it is just another way to keep black people out of the polls.
Yeah, nuisance to discourage people not to even pursue things.
Right.
I gotta do all of this to vote. Oh, forget it.
Exactly. Isn't it crazy how when they went to what was it? It's called the Georgia Coalition of the People's Agenda, right? That I like that whole thing that they got going on down there, because with that whole mishap, they were able to make phone calls. They stayed. One girl was like, "I'm staying down here." She was emotional about it. I'm like, we really need people like that. So I was thankful to see those kind of people. But the thing that kind of, it was heartwarming, but at the same time it was really sad, was to see them celebrating that man who seemed like he was about 50 or so, and it was his first time voting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. So that says a lot as well. There's a lot of people that just, even if we have the rights to vote now, they just don't vote.
There is I don't know who said it, but it has been said that the the devil's greatest trick is convincing people that he doesn't exist.
Exist. Yep.
And I think that has been in a large part like the racist greatest trick is convincing people that voting doesn't matter.
Yep.
If voting did not matter, they would not and will not and not continue to work so hard to prevent you from doing it, from lynching to just straight up murdering people, to burning down houses and polling places and churches where they vote and organize, to making it too expensive for you to vote. All of these things that they do, to all the gerrymandering and redistricting to try and either make it so that either you can't vote or that your vote is basically irrelevant. All of these things, if voting wasn't important, they wouldn't do all of this. But it is important, and don't let them trick you into believing that it's not.
Yeah. And also another thing that's important, which I have never been a part of when I need to start, is those side elections, when they're electing the the councilman or the governor, the governor is election goes around the same time.
Important ones.
Those go around the same time as the presidential, though, right? Is the governor?
But they often have multiple local elections in the interim years between presidential elections. They will have sometimes they have various primaries for different, based on your party. Sometimes they have, if someone resigns or gets, maybe takes maybe they get promoted, maybe they start off as a state senator and then they end up becoming a House representative or something. They'll have a special election. They have lots and lots of them. And if you contact your local party or your local registrar, you can get on a list so that they notify you every time there is an election, whether it be a special election or a regular local election, whatever, so that you don't ever miss them.
Yeah. We have signs out here.
They're text messaging us now up here. I don't know about y'all.
I get text.
They send stuff in the mail in New York. We just had, they got Cuomo out, and then they had she's running now, actually. So they had all of that go on with the governor and things of that nature. So,
but I will say this:
do it with that.
Make sure if you guys are out there, if you're not voting or if you're only voting in like the major presidential elections or something, vote in your local elections, because your local elections, not that I shouldn't say they're more important than the big races, but they are just as important, because some of the things that can most directly affect your day-to-day life happens in those elections. Whether it could be something as simple as whether or not you want to fund a bond to pay for a new park, or it could be something of who's going to be the next district attorney in your area. Is it going to be some crazy far right whack job who's going to prosecute every black person that comes up in their, whose file comes across their desk? And are you going to vote for a sheriff who's going to be brutalizing folks in the streets? Or are you going to vote for someone who's going to say, hey, I'm not going to prosecute people for simple marijuana possession because that's ridiculous, and I'm not going to waste our funds and resources doing that. And maybe you have a sheriff that's more interested in diversion than killing people in the street,
right?
So those local elections, and you vote for judges,
True. And like I said, I got to get involved because, those I hear those are very, very, especially like you said, for the place that you live in directly affecting you, you definitely need to get up on that.
They just had the fake senator up here in New York, but he's a Republican, and he got in office, and all his credentials are fake. He's spending campaign funds. They are trying their hardest, the Republicans, to get him out.
Speaking of
Yeah.
Republican, how did you guys like hearing about that? Republicans were, that was what basically, the African American part, they
I
were
knew that. They switched
Republicans.
it
Like,
up. They
no,
switched it up.
I did hear that before too, but they brought that up as well, unless I read something else, because I've been digging on stuff. So
I
before we
actually
get out of
found
here,
that
guys.
out this year when it was time to vote. And I
We
was
didn't
like,
we
wow.
didn't get to episode 2 yet.
Yeah, we about to right now. It's not. I don't have much notes. For episode 2, we're just talking about 2 things. It's the couple. If you guys remember that couple who it looked like, I think he said he was from Uganda, maybe, or something like that.
Oh, the first couple with
and
Ghana.
Ghana.
Ghana. Okay, Ghana.
Yeah.
So he was from Ghana, and she was
Ghana,
like Indian or something like that. And they refused to check their race on their marriage license. When they were applying for the marriage license, and this is in the state. Yeah, and this is in the state of Virginia. So, Larry, is that where you're from? Am I mistaken?
I'm originally from California, but I live in Virginia.
You live in Virginia. So,
yeah.
When you heard about this, because they're saying that like they could not get married if they were not going to check a box. Right. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Are you familiar with anything like that at all, just how you thought of what you felt about that whole situation, which is?
I wasn't surprised in the least. I mean, it's Virginia. It's the South. I mean, I live right next door to DC, so it doesn't always feel like the South all the time because it feels much more like an East Coast city, but it's still the South in its ways. And so, I mean, you check your race on every box. If I go to Starbucks and get a coffee, I have to check what race I am. But it's just, it's just kind of the way it is. But part of me, and I hate to say this, but I feel sometimes when I watch these programs, and I like that dude from Ghana, sometimes I feel like people are so disingenuous and trying to be, a little bit extra, like this whole thing of, I didn't even really realize what race was, and I didn't recognize before I came here, if I would have thought race was mean because I was running a race, and
I didn't believe that either, man. I didn't believe that either.
I feel like keep it real, bro. I mean, I get it. I get your aversion to not wanting to check the box and you're offended by it, but let's not be ridiculous and act like you brought your black butt all the way from Ghana to the U.S. not knowing what you were going to contend with when you got here. You knew there was a racial problem because we've all known it for the last 150, 200 years since we've had broad and widespread public, media that can travel the world quickly from the teletype.
Right.
We all know there's a racial problem in this country. I mean, so I don't like hearing disingenuous stuff like that. To me, I feel like when people do that, it minimizes and discounts what they have to say about it. And but I get where they don't want to check the box. To me, it's one of those things. To me, I've done it so much so for my entire life. I have known nothing other than that it doesn't bother me. I don't even think about it. I just do it. It's just one of those things. To me, it's no different than checking whether or not I'm male or female. But I guess if you're someone who's non-binary, maybe that box is a bigger deal to you.
Yeah. The crazy thing is like when she digs deep, because I love how she presents something and then she digs deep and goes way back to like the origin and how, they started this whole thing because it was like the drop of blood thing that Moochie was talking about, where now they got all these are you fourth or are you 1/4 black and this and that, and they actually had names for it and all that.
Yeah, they had different names. All of the names they had.
Yeah, I was like, what the heck? I've never seen.
You know what? It was a movie with Monique in it, and she was calling different ethnicity shows. So your man is Chinese and you white and y'all together, your baby gonna be Blackanese. Remember, she was doing all of that. It was stuff like that where I was like, man, like you know how like this she made that a joke, and they was like really like.
But here it is, they're really doing stuff like that,
and it's true. It like. Yeah. You know how you see stuff, you be like, dang, this was actually
interesting.
happening.
All of this really, I mean, some of it definitely had to do with race, but ultimately all of this had to do with economics, because all of this had to do with whether or not these biracial kids were going to have inheritance rights. Are they going to have, if this white dude laid down with his slave and she had a baby, does this baby now have rights to inherit his property? But this is the thing that gets me. It's always gotten me. No one has ever explained it to me. But these white dudes, these racist effers, these dudes have always talked about black folks and slaves as animals. They called them beasts. They called us beast of burdens. They talked about but you want to go and lay your ass down with what you call an animal. So are you also then having sex with your mule and your pig and your donkey and everything else? Are you just sticking your little pink willy wherever there's a gap? I mean, because if you're looking at us as animals, why are you then having sex?
That's the part I've never understood either. And speaking of that, that's one thing
I've never been sexually attracted to a labradoodle. I think they're cute as hell. Never want to have sex with one. They're beautiful animals.
That's what they were talking about in
but you know what else?
In this episode
Larry?
Too.
The lady in the journal, I got so mad when she said this creature came to me one day saying, and you know when she was reading her journal, because she said some days she would have empathy for them, and some days she would be disgusted with them.
Yeah, she was disgusted. Yeah. Well, they were saying, like, speaking of that, Larry, what you're talking about with the having sex with in episode 2, because that's where we're on now. So the fact that they're using these people as breeders as well, they're not just slaves, they're breeders. And also they could actually be in a relationship with another slave, but here it is. They got to go and be a part of this, this whole thing where they're putting folks together to breed. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's just so sad, and all the things that, all the slaves were subjected to, but also moving further, because I know we're trying to get out of here. So now we're going to talk about the experiments that they did on these slaves, on Black women, actually, operated on without anesthesia, even though there was anesthesia available. Based off of the racist belief or false idea, whatever, it all goes back to the racist beliefs, right? That we're immune to pain. Like, what the heck? And that is so freaking sad. Like, Moochie, I'll let you take this one first. It's disgusting, though, really.
Okay, they had the statue here in New York, right? Of the gynecologist they're speaking of. And then the 3 women, all of the women that they named, I was intrigued by this whole thing, how they were saying we were so immune to pain. from when I'm just thinking of, I did manual labor, like I was a cleaner or whatever, and then I went to driving the bus. That job really beat my body up as far as my knees and things of that nature. And they complaining about working in them fields, being sore, having arthritis and things of that nature, where the pain was unbearable. And no matter who they have people that shouldn't be out there working in them fields that long. People, and then they said when they were pregnant, they would work up to 3 trimesters. This whole thing with the experiments they did, it was horrible.
Yeah,
it was horrible. And it was horrible. And then they basically idolized this man and put him on a pedestal for being a tortured person that tortured people.
That's what they do. Go ahead, Larry. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to rush everybody along, but I know we're about to be in here for an hour, so trying to get everything.
This is one of those things that gets me when I hear about these things where they present Black women often as these aggressive, these aggressive, assertive women that are always out, always ready to speak their mind, always loud and boisterous and telling people what they think and feel. Yet, why is it then that Black women can't seem to speak up enough to get good health care? If that's the case, if they're all boisterous and aggressive and assertive, why is there a problem when Black women are like, I need I need a better doctor, someone who's listening to me, or that the doctor is often talking about the doctors don't listen to them. They don't hear them. I mean, we know that whole stereotype is just a complete fallacy. And it's frustrating when you see this and you hear it. Like, listening to that woman that was pregnant with twins. And
the Chrissy sample.
And part of me on one end is so frustrated with her doctors. Like, why are you not listening to this woman? She knows what she feels inside her body, and you're just disregarding her. And now one of her babies is dead. And then part of me on the other end is like, why are you immediately not hanging up and going to get another doctor?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I remember a couple years ago, I had an issue and my doctor was not, I didn't feel like my doctor was taking me seriously. I literally nagged the shit out of him. Excuse me, French. I showed up at his office without appointments. I was like, we're going to get every single test imaginable approved.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have to contend with me constantly. Mm-hmm. And then he did. He approved everything. He was like, I'm gonna get you tested for anything
and everything. Yeah. I mean, part of it is being your own advocate. But then there was that doctor who was saying that this has nothing to do with status. It has nothing to do with poverty
economics
or economic, nothing. It's the fact that there's this bias when it comes to Black women, and it just goes so far back that they might not even realize that they're being biased towards us. Mm-hmm. And that's sad, because I think they even brought up Serena Williams. Like, somebody like her, she almost died on the birthing table. So it's like, you're not exempt no matter what. The problem is, and the common connector is being a Black woman. And then when they said that we're the fetal mortality rate is more than twice as high compared to white women because of the medical care is not as good, the mistreatment and stuff. I honestly, it's not surprising, but I did not know that women, especially Black women, were still out here dying. Women, period, out here dying in childbirth.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
They had a big thing last year about that.
I want to say this, and I'm not trying to discount anything as far as what Black women go through at all. But it's not just Black women; it is Black people as a whole. Because I can think of so many stories where people are out there. Some man has cancer for years, and he feels like, oh, I had something feeling like going wrong in my stomach, but he just never did anything about it. Oh, I don't go to doctors. I don't like doctors or whatever. And they just go about their life. And then 25 years later, they finally go to the doctor because they're basically, on the floor dying. Right. And the doctor's like, you have a 20-pound mass in your stomach. How have you even lived like this? This isn't even possible. How could you live like this? And then, they end up thinking, well, Black people obviously don't feel pain. It's not that Black people feel pain. Sometimes I think that Black people, because of our circumstances, we may have a higher tolerance for pain, but that doesn't mean we don't feel it. We're just able to work through it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people have to work through it because they don't have health insurance, and people are like, I would rather feed my kid than spend a whole month's rent, trying to go see a doctor and get medication. They'll just deal with it later, and then, but people take that as we don't feel pain because we don't complain about the pain until the pain is completely unbearable. And that's not the case. And the problem with that is sometimes when you get to the point where you have to say something because the pain is unbearable, it's too late to do anything about what's causing the pain.
Yeah.
And
really sad. I understood we're about to get out of here in a minute. And also, DeMarcus, I see your super chat. I'm coming. I will be there in a minute. The Chrissy sample story, when she started talking about how she was telling, like you said, Larry, she was telling the doctor she was in pain and she just didn't have a good feeling about this doctor. She's like, oh, they're just pressing on you or whatever, dismissing everything. It was really sad. And it kind of reminded me of, when I had my miscarriage, like my doctor, that he was my GYN, and I thought he was very thorough and everything. But when he was telling me that my baby had no heartbeat, he said it so like nonchalantly. And because he was so nonchalant, I felt weird about having emotions, but I was devastated. Like I almost couldn't breathe. And when I finally got out, I was like having a panic attack and I started, crying and everything. But it's like, it is true. These doctors, sometimes they're just telling you like, this is just a regular old thing. Oh, and he says to me, oh, it happens all the time. It doesn't matter if it happens all the time. This is a painful situation. Yeah.
I'm just talking about my child dying.
Yeah. I was just like, are you kidding me? Sorry, Larry,
I've talked to some doctors about that, about bedside manner and the way they talk to them stuff. When I used to be a photojournalist, and it's one of the great things about being a photojournalist is that you get to basically walk into all different types of people's lives, and they just open themselves up like a book and tell you all kinds of stuff, which is wonderful. But one of the things that doctors have told me about this is that they say it seems cruel. But they were like, as a human being who has to deliver bad news to people, sometimes multiple times a day, they were like, if you don't disconnect yourself from it and say it just very clinically, you can't do your job. You can't function after a while. You will eventually break down to where you can no longer do this particular type of work. And one woman who talked about this, she was a woman who worked as she was a pediatric oncologist, and she talked about how, like, she was at Children's Hospital, I think it was in Orange County in California, but she was like, most people can't, like, most doctors don't last there, but for like 18 months because it's just too much. And she was like, the ones that do, they have to learn how to like seriously compartmentalize, everything. And when they have to deliver bad news, sometimes it seems cruel that they don't sit there and tell the family in a very gentle way and cry with them. They were like, you can't do it. You just can't do it.
That would be emotionally draining.
You have to give them the facts and let them go deal with it on their own. And I understand that from a patient's point of view, you don't want that sort of cold, calculated interaction with your doctor. But I also don't want a doctor who's so emotional that they can't function and do their job properly, because you are the patient who's there and you need that doctor's full attention, and that doctor has half their attention with the patient who just died 30 minutes earlier and they're broke up over that. I mean, it's I don't think there's any good answers for it. I don't think there's any good answers. There's no one's going to be happy.
Right. And I get what you're saying, but it's like, I don't expect the doctor to cry with me, but if you're not an ER doctor and I'm not just somebody kind of passing through, you should still have bedside manner as the ER doctor too. But if you are my doctor, you know what I'm saying? Like, come on now. Don't deliver no news to me like this is just a regular, you're just telling me, oh yeah, that's just a little cut. You got to put a little Band-Aid on it. I'll give you a little cream. No, I mean,
right. You
know what I'm saying? You're telling me that this life that I was looking forward to is not going to happen. You know what I mean? So it's just like, wow, why? It's just disgusting things, but And
I think it's one of those things where they should, I think in certain cases, that type of interaction should be removed from their purview. It should not be their responsibility to deliver that news. Like, maybe they work up the patient, they do what they do, they hand that file off to someone else, to a maybe it's a marriage and family therapist or to a psychologist or someone who's a medical professional that can explain everything, but also be there as an emotional comfort and have the tools to engage with that person. It's sort of like what people are talking about doing with police officers. Instead of having police officers respond to people who are having mental health, emergencies, send someone who is actually skilled and trained to deal with those mental health emergencies. Because most doctors, they'll do maybe they have one rotation as a psychiatric rotation during their residency, and that's all they do, and they're not equipped to deal with it. They can't deal with it because it's too much for them to deal with on a daily basis.
That's true. Yeah. So let me take this super chat and then we're going to get out of here, guys. DeMarcus Vaughn, thank you for the super chat. He says, call me crazy, but I feel Black History Month should be changed from February to June because of Juneteenth. We definitely need a longer month. How about that?
Like, what's the shortest month?
Well, it wasn't actually designed to be in the shortest month. It was that originally Black History Month was Black History Week, and it was in February, and it was an expansion of Black History Week into the full month. So
yeah, ain't that some week? Unbelievable. Well, this was really awesome, guys. Sorry, go ahead, Larry.
I would personally like to see Black History Month move to August because it is one of the longest months of the year, for one, but also there's no federal holidays in the month of August. And so if we had a federal holiday that acknowledged all of our great Black, people of history, our Harriets, our Malcolms, our Martins. Well, Martin has his own day, but all these other great Black leaders that are out there, it would be great to have a day that acknowledge them, and in a day where there's not currently a federal holiday, that in a month where there's not currently a federal holiday.
And that would be suitable because that's when she was saying that in the year 1619, it was August, the month of August where they came. So that would be awesome, actually. So before we leave, I wanted to ask you guys, was there something, because I know, Larry, you went further into, was there anything that you wanted to mention before we get out of here that we did not talk about, or that, wasn't even a part of episode 1 or 2?
I mean, they touched on it. I feel like they touched on it briefly, I think, but one of the things that one of the most, I think, insidious parts of our history was after they withdrew the troops out of the South, and they started this system of basically of peonage. Really, it was just a slavery by another name, where they were basically just scooping up Black men and arresting them and using them as forced labor, just selling them off, and they became property of the state, and then they were leased out to companies to do manual labor, and that has continued for decades and decades and decades, and it's only in the last couple of decades that they've started to actually outlaw that. But I think they touched on it barely. I feel like it's one of those things where they really should go in depth about. And there are companies out there that still use it. That's one of the reasons years ago I stopped buying anything that was Eddie Bauer, because Eddie Bauer was one of those companies that was using prison labor for their clothing. And I was like, I'm not going to support them in any way, shape, or form, because that to me is just absolutely disgusting that you pay someone 30, 50, 60 cents, an hour, because you're taking advantage of the fact that they're locked up in jail for something that they may have not done.
That's true.
Or even if they did do, you're still taking advantage of them in that sense. At the very least, they should be paid a minimum wage.
Right.
I wish they would have gone deeper into that. And I mean, I said it earlier, I want them to go deeper into everything. I feel like all of these topics that they're touching on, there's such big issues. They're not 1 hour episode issues. These are like an entire series of their own.
You were right with that. You were right with saying that some of these topics that they hit on needed a whole episode in its own.
Really?
It is
a whole documentary.
I mean, yeah. No.
Unbelievable.
I didn't know they ate us.
Whoa. Okay, now talk about that, Moochie, because you went.
I was the babies, I knew about them throwing the babies to the gators.
Yeah,
I knew about that.
Yeah. So is this found in episode 1 and 2? Or
I don't know if it was that. I've been seeing so much Black history stuff this month where I'm in shock with half of the things that I'm seeing. And it's sad. I knew about the place where they told you not to eat the fruit and stuff. And they touched on that.
Okay.
It was just so much stuff where it just was like, oh my goodness, our people really suffered.
Yeah.
And the more I think about it, it brings me to today with how these young boys is just talking about knocking each other off, talking about taking each other out. And it's sad. Like, how did we get here?
I will say, moving on, I don't know if we're going to talk about this again, if we're going to come back on and talk about the other episodes, but
if you guys want to.
The first 2 episodes are kind of hard. If you haven't watched the show yet, the series, if you haven't started watching this, the first 2 episodes are kind of difficult because it's one of those things. Like I personally get a little frustrated with it when we talk about Black history and Black people, because so much of it is about struggle stuff, and we are so much more than the struggle. And I feel like when we finally got to episode 3 and they started talking about the music and they started talking about, you know, Motown and the way that Black culture permeated our country's broader culture, that we really started to get past some of just the struggle.
Yeah, I did see some of that.
And that, to me, I feel like we as, you know, I feel like if I was the person that was greenlighting her film, I would tell her, you need to infuse more of the positive in here. I'm not saying that you have to water down the negative, but we need to have more than the struggle. Black people are more than our struggle, and I want to see it up front and prominently.
Yeah, me too. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you guys for being here in the chat. Stan, Suburbia Jones, LSW, your queen.
Shout out to all my peoples out there that said hello, and I didn't get a chance to say what up to them, you know. Big ups
Kendall,
to you.
LSW, DeMarcus, all of you guys. Thank you so much for coming through. Eric S. Thank you, Moochie, and Larry, the living legend. You know,
where do you think barbecuing come from?
Wow.
What?
Oh, you wanted me to highlight your queen's comment? Where is that?
Yeah.
Oh, the February about this. Black History Month is in February because of Frederick D. being a prominent leader in the fight to abolish slavery. His birthday is in February, and Abe Lincoln is 2/12.
Okay.
I'll just say
that's a good.
You know, people always present Abraham Lincoln as this great white savior,
right?
And I'll just say this: I'm not going to say that he didn't do some wonderful things, and he signed the Emancipation Proclamation and all that. He was a wartime president during the Civil War. But if you go and read his writings, you will see he is not that great white savior that you think he is. He clearly wrote it down that he would keep every single enslaved person enslaved if it meant the preservation of the Union, you know? And he also said he would free every single slave that there is if it meant the preservation of the Union. So he was, it's not that he was anti-slavery to some extent, but it wasn't as such like he was willing. Like he wasn't like he was just saying, okay, I'm no slavery under no circumstances. He was basically pro-American. He wanted America to be America no matter what it took. So I just say that because oftentimes people present him as if he's like this great white savior that we should all look up to as Black people. And it's just not that clean. It's just not that clean cut. There's a lot of politics like anything else. He was a president. He was a politician. There was a lot of that. And this is one of those great times of the year where you have every excuse that you need to go and read that type of history. You know,
facts, definite facts. If I had time, trust me, I'd be reading so much. It was not even funny, man. I got some news today that I'm on a fast track to write my dissertation. It has to be done by the end of August, or I will have to
get it. You gonna get it?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be slowing down, guys, probably on these videos because I gotta put my head down and plow. Yeah,
so better go pull up ChatGPT.
Huh?
You better pull up ChatGPT. Let AI write some of that.
Yeah. Behind the scenes about that.
Review panel. I'm just joking.
All right, y'all. Y'all be blessed, and we will see you next time. Thank you once again. Remember, vote. It's very important. They said it's power involved. Get out there and vote, y'all.
Yeah.
Love ya. Yo, my